We'd like to welcome Sam Granato, who's a Democratic candidate for the U.S. Senate seat here in the state of Utah. Welcome.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
Let's get started with this question of earmarks. Earmarks are a big issue in the national spotlight. Tell us, what's your thinking about earmarks? And if you were elected U.S. Senator, what would be your philosophy about using them?
Well, they needed to be used responsibly. That we get so much backlash on earmarks and people vote against them. If we don't use it responsibly and we're not taking care of the people's business with the money that's funded for earmarks, we don't get a lot of the projects in the cities where it's needed to create jobs.
So there's some situations in which you would think it would be okay to use an earmark. As a U.S. Senator, you'd pursue those earmarks for the municipalities, the counties, or whatever.
Very much so.
Approached you. Would there be any limits to the use of earmarks in your estimation?
Well, of course there's a limit. There should be a limit to everything. I come from a small business background. Everything I have to do and do in my business is done fiscally conservatively, and that's how I would approach the earmarks.
So, once again, under some circumstances it would be fine, but at some level you'd want to cap them off.
Of course.
Okay. One of the other issues that has been quite prominent in this election cycle is the creation of TARP, the Troubled Asset Relief Program, which was essentially the program that bailed out the banks, or kept
Correct.
banks from failure. Had you been a U.S. Senator at that time, would you have voted for the Troubled Asset Relief Program?
Knowing what I know about it, yes, I would have voted for it, and I would have probably voted with some more money behind it. I don't believe enough money was given. As you well know, Senator Bennett voted for it, and now he says he would have not voted for it. So he's changed his attitude towards it.
What were the principles that you thought were so important that you would have voted for it?
We were in a financial collapse. If we really knew how deep it was, and I don't know, but all that I've read and heard about, if it was not put into place, we'd be in a lot more hurt than we are now in this great recession.
Okay, so it was necessary to keep the banks from failing, and probably, in your estimation, made it possible for the United States to avoid even more catastrophic failure.
Correct.
Okay. Another prominent issue in this cycle is the issue of healthcare reform. Senator Bennett co-sponsored a bill with Senator Wyden from Oregon on healthcare reform. What are the principles that would guide your reflection, your actions on healthcare reform if you were to be able to vote on healthcare reform?
What are the principles that would guide it? The principles that would guide it is the need to have the reform. I have been blessed the last several years to be on the board of Intermountain Health Care. I see where there's some inadequacies, and I see that people need help. We have people expecting to pay for a Volkswagen policy, if you will, and drive away in a Cadillac. There's too much abuse in the system. We need reform, and we need people, especially in this country, such a great, powerful country, that we have 50 million people without insurance. We have 14,000 people a day losing their health insurance. It is a right to have and should be treated as people need to have the respect and have the insurance.
So you see health insurance as a right, that people should have access to health care reform.
Very
it's just
much
a basic
so.
right. And so it's that issue of coverage that is one of the issues that you
It's
see.
completely out of hand with the administrative costs and with all the lobbyists that are involved.
Okay, so this is the second. How would you bring down the cost of health care reform? A lot of people say that the trade-offs between covering everybody and containing costs are really too difficult to overcome in such a complex system. So what?
It is a complex system, and it's not going to be done overnight, but it needs to be started.
So what can you do to bring down costs, the cost of health care reform, health care insurance?
I would more electronic filing, get rid of a lot of the administrative, and most of the insurance company executives making millions of dollars a year. It's way out of hand.
So you've been on the board of IHC, so you've had almost kind of a bird's eye view of what's been regarded as one of the most successful healthcare systems in the United States. What is it specifically that IHC does that you would like to see perhaps done on a national level?
There's not as much greed in IHC as you see on the national level.
And the greed
and it's
is
more
where,
transparent.
and the greed is where? The greed is among the physicians or the executives?
I
or
believe
the
it's
insurance?
among the executives and the administrative costs.
The administrative costs. What about the cost of healthcare itself? The administration of the tests, the cost of the procedures, those kinds of things. Is there something that can be done to rein those costs in as well?
They're out of hand.
They're out of hand.
Of course there's things that can be done.
So,
Do I have the blueprint in my hand? No. Does it need to be fixed? Yes.
okay. Let's talk about the issue of bipartisanship. People are frustrated with Washington, D.C. Poll after poll shows that they don't believe that things are getting done in the United States like they should be. The Senate is often gridlocked. The members of the House are often gridlocked as well when you're talking about pitting party against party. What's your attitude about bipartisanship? When can you work with members from across the aisle? When could you work with the Senator Mitch McConnell from Kentucky, say?
I think you start working with them from the get-go. You don't sit on your hands and say no. You know, I've been using the slogan, I'm with the party of hope, not the party of nope. And I'm pleased to say I have a good friend in Senator Orrin Hatch. I know that I could work with him, and that I've had the opportunity to be involved in public service for most of my life, and especially the last several years. I have been on the Department of Alcoholic Beverage Control. I've been able to reach across the aisle. I've been able to bring people to a consensus. I don't always know every issue as I get into it, but as I study it and learn and figure out a way to help the people, that's what I love to do.
Do you think there's too much gridlock in Washington, D.C.? Do you think this is a problem?
There's way too much gridlock, and there's too many lobbyists involved.
Too many lobbyists.
There's too many people thinking you have entitlements.
And so this bipartisanship, what specifically do you think you would bring with regard to your personality? You said you like to fix
I think
problems,
with my
solve problems.
personality, I can get in and I can communicate. I can reach across the aisle, and I can call people to the task that's in front of them, and that's the people's business. Once I'm elected, I can go back. I'm going to be representing 3 million of the best constituents in this country, and I believe that their needs have been forgotten for too long. Once I'm elected, I will be the best salesperson that the Senate has seen from the state of Utah. That's what a senator is a salesman, and I'm a pretty good salesman. I get in and I will represent the needs. You'll hear the word Utah addressed more on the Senate floor and in the media. I will hire someone to push the state of Utah and to bring business into Utah.
One of the issues that often gets talked about, especially in Utah politics, is the idea of constitutional principles. People talk a lot about constitutional principles and following the Constitution as a guide. They often talk about constitutional principles in danger. Do you see any constitutional principles in danger, and if so, which ones would they be?
I think that's a fear tactic when we hear that. I don't see any in danger. The Constitution is a living document, and it's one that is changing. I think it was completely inspired by our founding fathers when they put it together, but there's a lot of things that have happened and a lot of new industries and a lot of new technology that they didn't anticipate. And the world, as the world changes, some of the amendments need to change. But if we get back to the core principles of what made this country great and work with civility towards each other, our Constitution will be safe.
What are those core principles?
Respect, civility, taking care of our neighbors, and no entitlements, and not being better than the next person. We're all in this together, and we need to remember how to take care of our neighbors, our families, and those around us.
As a member of Congress, you'd also have a great deal of responsibility, especially in the Senate, over the conduct of foreign policy. You know, the United States is involved in 2 wars, one in Afghanistan, one in Iraq. What kind of timetable do you see for the war in Afghanistan, and how should it be prosecuted?
Well, I was very much behind President Obama bringing more troops to Afghanistan. He did not start the war, but it's his to finish. And I have to take him at his word that the troops that he called up to be in Afghanistan would get the job done and be out within a year. And I believe that's what needs to happen.
Yeah, just a new, an infusion of 6,000 troops, another 25,000 troops on the way. You would have voted for the surge had you had the opportunity to vote for that surge. Well, how about the war in Iraq? How do you think that's being prosecuted? Are you okay with the results as they've been demonstrated?
That's a war
over time?
we should have never gotten into. I believe we were led down the wrong path with that war, but we're in that war. And we've got great citizens over there, our military, fighting that war. We need to get that war ended, and we need to bring our troops home.
So if you'd had that chance to vote for the war in Iraq, the authorization for the war in Iraq, as a U.S. Senator, you would not have done that. You would
That's correct.
You would not have voted for that. What are the major foreign policy issues do you see on the horizon confronting the United States? As a small businessman, probably you're involved in issues with regard to trade, and any other issues that you see on the horizon with regard to foreign policy that affect the economic growth of the state of Utah?
Well, I think there's a lot of them. I think that we have outsourced too much of our industries, and I think we need to have some balance and bring that back. Once I am elected the next United States Senator, my goal will be to bring small business and industry to every rural county in this state. We have too much talent leaving the small communities because there's nothing to feed their families, and they need to have the money. And with the new technologies that we have in this country and that we're developing every day, we can put small businesses into every rural county in the state of Utah.
So as a United States Senator, how would you prioritize the issues that you would address and attack your first couple of years in office?
Well, my first couple of years, I would go back, as I said, to being the salesman for the state of Utah, taking care of people and making sure they have jobs so that they can put food on the table. I think the most important thing is not only the economic advantage that the jobs can bring, but the sense of hope when they go home at night, not a sense of frustration. I think that we need to remember who we are, where we've come from, and bring it back together so that we can all grow, not only as a state, but as a country.
Okay, so with job creation then, obviously very important to you, what's the role of the federal government in job creation, especially with the burgeoning federal deficits? What exactly can the federal government do to help create jobs and at the same time not add to that federal deficit?
Well, part of what they have done is the stimulus money.
And would you have voted for the stimulus?
I would have voted for the stimulus. Again, I don't believe we had enough stimulus that came in. We had $2 billion come into the state of Utah, and that $2 billion has created and saved a lot of jobs, a lot of school teachers, a lot of construction jobs. Had our senators and even some representatives been more fond of that stimulus for the state of Utah, we could have probably increased it by 20 or 30%.
The amount of money available to the state.
They seem to act like that money was tainted, but I think that the people that are out of work and that are wondering where their next paycheck's going to come from don't look at it as tainted, but as a way of survival.
Yeah, so now how do you balance then this issue of stimulus spending with deficit reduction? Which one is more important in your
Well, they've got to have a good balance between them. You can't overdo and you can't underdo. We are a small enough state that we could have increased that stimulus that the state of Utah got by another 20 or 30%, and it would not have affected the larger states, but it would have made a lot more inroads for the people in Utah.
Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate you coming today.
It was a pleasure to be here. Thank you.